Welcome to another edition of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career Outreach Coordinator at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at KU.
Hello and welcome to episode number 73 of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the Career and Outreach Coordinator for the KU School of Journalism and Mass Communications. Today, I'm joined by James Sido, Director of Media Relations and Issues Management for Downtown Seattle Association. Welcome, James.
Welcome to you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I've been aware of your career. I know you graduated in 1999. I think I've known you since 1999. So
I think you
25 years. Does it seem that long ago that you walked down the hill graduating?
No, it does not seem that long ago. And in looking back at some of the memories of my senior year and then my extended semester, we'll call it, to finally get through, it really does seem like just a handful of years ago, being primarily at the Dole Center, which was where a lot of that the media coursework was done, and then also at the old KJHK house over there, just what would that be, north of Memorial Stadium. And really, it is cliche, but those really are some of the best years, the most formative years really of your life. And I certainly, I'll talk anybody's ear off about KU and my experience there at the university. And I do think it was tremendously important for me on a number of professional levels, but also personally, and it all around terrific experience. And I've recommended the university to a good number of people, including two nephews and a niece who did not end up going there, but they did apply and they did get in. But yeah.
Now, St. Louis is your hometown, right?
St. Louis is my hometown. Also lived briefly in Dallas. Okay. So kind of spent time between both of those cities. And the high school years were spent in St. Louis. And that really spurred my interest in KU. And when it came time to decide where I was going to go to school, there were really three options in my mind. There was the University of Texas because I qualified for in-state tuition there because my dad still lived there. There was Indiana, because I knew a lot of people going there and they had a pretty good program for journalism. And then there was Kansas. And I had some of my best friends going to KU. And then I also got a look at their journalism program, and I was really impressed. I knew that's what I wanted to do at a very young age. And in my mind, I was going to be a mix between Bob Costas, Jim Nance, and throw in your standard sort of radio talk show host somewhere in there as well. And that program and that school seemed like a perfect fit for what I wanted to do. And I had a lot of friends who were going to Missouri and going into journalism, and they asked, why not Mizzou? And I said, I never even considered it. And I didn't. It was always going to be Kansas. So that program and my good friends from high school really steered me in that direction, and I'm forever grateful.
And I know you started in sports. I think your degree's in broadcast management. So
right.
Did you envision yourself being in Seattle in a PR role 25 years after graduating?
No, not at all. And in fact, my career was going in terms of sports broadcasting, kind of how I had mapped things out. I mean, I knew that to go back to when I was at KU, I knew I wanted to do either radio or TV. And I got a phone call from a general manager at a radio station in Falls City, Nebraska, of 99. I want to say it might have been around February or so of 99. And I remember thinking to myself, and in the back of my head, I had Tom Hedrick saying, go to Boise. When you're starting out, go to Boise. And I knew what he meant. He meant go to a market where you can do everything. But in my mind, I didn't think that he meant Falls City, Nebraska. So I got that call. The GM asked if I was interested in talking about a role there. And I kind of played him off a little bit. And I thought, I need to switch gears here. I need to get into TV. So that led me to 6 News in Lawrence to apply for an internship. And I got the internship. And so I started out as a news reporter at 6 News. And you should really throw that title in quotations, because what I did was very far from news. I did a lot of stuff that probably should not have made air at that point. Going to the Chamber of Commerce golf tournament when it was like 10 degrees out, covering that. When it was Leap Day, doing a story about Leap Day and walking up and down Mass Street and doing MOS with people about how they were celebrating Leap Day. There were some really just, I was I was trying to find a fun and funny way to fill 2 minutes of airtime. And so I did that briefly. And I did report on some serious news during that brief span too. But as soon as there was an opening in the sports department, I funneled over there because that's what I always wanted to do. And so I worked with Kevin Romery for a number of years at 6 News. And that you got to do everything at Channel 6. I mean, you remember what the operation was like, right?
No, that's where I got to know you. We shared the press box, quite a few press boxes over the years. I know you guys did a good job covering high school sports. I hope the Lawrence residents really appreciated the work you guys did, because I mean, you treated those programs like almost like major college. I mean, games of the week, instant replay, and led the sportscast with that, and which brings me back to my only color commentator position. I don't know if you remember this or not. 2001 Class 6A state baseball, third place game. Lynn Herod had a previous commitment. I don't know. He went to bat for me, but it was my one and only color commentator position. What memories do you have of that great game in 2001?
I remember you having encyclopedic knowledge of the players, which should not surprise anybody. And I remember what I would call now, and just a reaffirmation that baseball was not my best play-by-play sport at all. And I think you had to carry a lot of that telecast, I would imagine.
One thing I remember, we did a little pregame on Hoagland. So we were on the field, and for whatever reason, we were looking over the press box, and the sun was in my eyes. I don't know how you did it, but I'm sure if you found that video, I had this major squint on, because it's like, where is the camera? But that was fun.
Yeah, though that whole operation was foundational for so many people who either stayed at 6 and worked in the community for years after, like Kevin, or people who went to other markets. I mean, that to this day, I do think that some of the most talented people that I worked with in my broadcast career were at 6 News. Romery, in my opinion, is one of the best play-by-play guys that I've ever known. And people on the production side, it's just it was an operation that really did truly feed the community, and I'm still angry that it's gone, frankly. And I haven't told my wife this yet, but if we happen to win the Powerball, one of the things I'm going to do is try to seed an operation to get local TV back up and running in Lawrence, Kansas, because it's ridiculous that they don't have that station. But again, that's if the Powerball happens or a huge football. So, yeah.
And speaking of your time at 6 News, go ahead.
Yeah, it was an opportunity to do everything. Whatever your passion was, I mean, you could do it. And especially from a sports perspective, when you think about being able to not only do a nightly sportscast, but also have the opportunity to do play-by-play, sideline reporting. We did a game show for a while, one-on-one, and you would shoot your own stuff sometimes, right? And so being able to wear all of those hats and do all of those things I think it made people who worked there the opportunity to do all those things. I think it made them better reporters and better journalists because they understood the totality of story gathering and storytelling.
And I know here at the J School, we talk a lot about transferable skills. I would assume those skills you developed in those early years, I would imagine you use those now, like with media relations. I don't know if you do much anymore with the audio video production side, but can you talk about some of those transferable skills that have stayed with you for 20 some years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that at its foundation, storytelling is integral to so many careers. And storytelling really is the basis for how you can, I think, not only further your company's mission, for example, or bring attention to your company or to your issues or your position, but it's how you can push advocacy to get things accomplished from a policy level. It's how you can sort of, I won't say influence public opinion, but you can sort of shape opinion through the art of storytelling, and that is something that we do on a daily basis. Whether it is putting together, and if you go to our Downtown Seattle YouTube page, you'll see a number of videos that we put together. So we've got a fairly deep catalog there. But whether it's putting together a story about a person who has come out of the criminal justice system, has been addicted to drugs for nearly her entire life, has never held a job until she was in her 50s, finds a job, finds a path to stability, and does so because of the organization that you work for and the programs that you offer. Telling that kind of story, for example, that can help inform people about the work that they see for, we call them downtown ambassadors on a daily basis. But these are people that are coming into second chance employment situations, right? So that in turn not only impacts the person who is walking in downtown Seattle and sees this person completing this task, but also it'll help inform the mayor of Seattle, the city council of Seattle, and on up the policy ladder about the work that we're doing in downtown, not only to provide these second chance jobs, but also to create a more vibrant downtown area, for example.
Now that transition from sports to like public relations, was that a tough one? And not so much the skill set, but I know like I did print journalism sports for 16 years and then I transitioned to PR, and it took me a while. My body rhythm was off. I mean, working the nights, the weekend. My body is probably, what is going on, Steve? You're not usually in bed before 1 a.m., 2 a.m. getting the paper done. Did it take you a while to adjust?
It did. And, part of the adjustment period there too. So my transition out of TV full time occurred really around 2010. Okay. And that was when we were coming out of the Great Recession, and there were newsrooms not only across Seattle, but across the country that were cutting, coming out of those financial times, right? They were squeezing staffs, and primarily when they were squeezing at that point, they were going to squeeze out the sports staff. And at that point, I knew that I loved living in Seattle. It's a great city, but I knew that if I wanted to continue in sports television, that I may have to move markets. Maybe you try to latch on with an ESPN. There was the regional network at that time, like Root Sports, for example. Back then, it might have been Fox Sports Northwest. But anyway, like make that decision or do something that might have a little bit more shelf life to it. And in my mind, it made a lot more sense to try something that had potentially a longer shelf life to it. And that's when I made the decision to leave sports television and go into PR. And the rhythm is a lot different. Yeah. And initially you have a task, and you're sort of working off of that muscle memory that you did as a reporter, and you're just slamming on stuff. You're turning it quickly, and and I found this is true with a lot of news people who go into PR or other lines of work, is that they tend to work at a faster pace and try to and complete things way ahead of schedule. And the good thing about being out of the media is that you understand you do have the ability to maybe take a breath.
Right.
You've got time to get it done. But yeah, that timing thing was certainly an issue at the outset. But also, I think it's a benefit too. I mean, if you've got the ability to turn things quickly and to react quickly, that's a benefit. That's a plus. And that's one of those things that I do think journalism does train you for, is the ability to read and react. And in my role, for example, there are oftentimes in a given month where you're responding to what would be a crisis communications situation. And the journalism background certainly helps prepare you for that, because you understand timing, you understand the basics of what the reporting is going to be, and what information you can help fill in. And frankly, you know what your responsibility is and what your responsibility is not. And when it comes to crisis communications, for example, if something happens in the middle of downtown Seattle, there's only so much that my perspective is needed for or is warranted for. And then at those other points, that's where you understand that there are other officials that need to be filling in those other gaps. A very long-winded response, but basically, yeah, the transition, it made a lot of sense to me logically at the time. And initially, it was difficult because, frankly, my identity for a long time had been as a sports guy.
Right.
That's what I was, and to change that at a fairly early age, that at the time it felt challenging, just for your psyche, to know that you would not be that person anymore. And so for a little while, when I transitioned out of full-time sports, I kept my toe in it because I would freelance at my wife's station, the CBS station up here in Seattle. And so that meant anchoring sports occasionally, but also helping out with their Seahawks coverage, and with NCAA tournament shows. And had a lot of fun doing that. But after a while, you realize, no, I mean, if you're going to be a professional in your given field, then maybe focus on that a little bit more. And so then I decided I needed to leave the freelance work behind. But I will say that given today's landscape, and there are a number of KU grads I'm aware of who are doing that, where they're sort of straddling a couple of different industries.
Right. They've
got like one toe in journalism or in podcasting or what have you, and then they've got a day job. I do think that is that's a pretty great way to sort of scratch both itches.
And here at we have a lot of students, obviously, that love sports and sports broadcasting. We recently launched a new concentration sports media society. What do you have to say to those students? I know you obviously paid your dues. I mean, Lawrence, and you moved on to Wichita before Seattle. I know some of these students, right away, they want to thank ESPN, those big major networks. What about that value of paying your dues for a while before you start moving on?
Yeah, I know. I think there's a lot to it. And I again, Tom Hendricks saying, go to Boise. And his intention there is to go somewhere where you can get your hands into a lot of different aspects of the job, to understand the full, sort of the full ingredient list, or really the full makeup of what it is to be a journalist or a storyteller or a broadcaster. I would still recommend those steps. What it is funny now, you see people at a younger age getting into bigger markets maybe than they did before. So my goal when I left 6 News in Lawrence was to make it to a top 15 market at some point. And so Seattle was my end market, right? But for a lot of people now, you're seeing a younger and younger entry point for this size of a market. And I think now we might be market 11. I think, I'm not sure, but you're seeing reporters come here to this market coming out of like Palm Springs, for example. So making these huge DMA jumps, right? And frankly, from a storytelling perspective, I don't know that all of them are necessarily ready for it. So I do think getting a little bit of seasoning and cutting your teeth in smaller to mid markets is a really good idea. And that's what I would recommend for people getting into the industry now. If you want to get to ESPN as fast as you can because you think that there's some cachet involved there, I get it, but know what you're walking into, and know that it's probably going to be a real grind. But I think being able to demonstrate that you've got chops at a small and medium market, I think there's something to be said for that.
Oh, no, well said. You've mentioned your wife a couple times. Now, you met her while you were at 6 News, right?
Yeah, when I contacted the station about an internship, the news director at that time, Scott Holman, told me to come back like the next Tuesday or whatever to interview for the internship. And then I got there and that next Tuesday, and Scott was out sick that day. And so he had me interview with their main anchor for the internship. And that main anchor is now my wife. So that's
been a great interview.
She interviewed me for an internship, and I'm sure I gave her just such BS. I mean, like it was, and I can still picture it actually. It's pretty funny. And so, we did not date when I was an intern and she was an anchor. But we were friends. We stayed friends. And so she went from Lawrence to Madison, Wisconsin, to Columbus, Ohio, to Seattle. And we stayed in touch after she left Lawrence, and by email, occasionally, and we were friends. And so I knew when I was in Wichita, I knew that she had landed in Seattle, and at that time, I was with an agent, and I had a conversation with that agent in December of 2006. At that point, and it was the first time we'd ever met face to face. I worked with him over the phone and email, and he and I had never sat down and talked shop face to face before. So I met him the night before the K-State Rutgers Bowl game in 2006. And so he said, we need to get you into a market where there's a major league team. I said, I agree. That's great. I had sent out some stuff to Charlotte and to Kansas City, and had an interview in Kansas City that I don't think went very well. I think I made some comments that probably didn't help my cause there. But so he said, yeah, we need to get you to a major league market. And I said, yeah, well, I'm all for it. And there was a job open at the ABC affiliate in Seattle. And as luck would have it, a guy who was a producer at my station in Wichita, Kate, happened to be at that station. And he told the news director he had somebody in mind for a sports opening. Now, my agent sent a reel, but what he did, and you hear stories about agents doing this, is he sent a group reel. So he sent the news director a DVD with like 6 to 8 people on it, and I was one of the people, which I think is kind of low, right? If I tell the agent that I'm interested in this market and this opening, then just send my stuff. It's that easy. He didn't do that, but the producer did get me in with the news director, and so I had an in there, and that ultimately I think got me the job. So I accepted the job sight unseen, but I knew that Monique was up here at a different station. So I just sent her an email and said, hey, I got this job in Seattle. I know you're up there. they're flying me out to find a place to live. Let's meet up. And so we did. And so about a year later, we started dating, and then got married in 2013.
Wow. So 11 years already.
Yeah. 11 years in August. Yeah.
Before we move on to Fast Five, kind of one last
Yep.
question. I know before we started the podcast here, you're visiting with Cal Butcher. Who are some of those kind of mentors, those big influences, during your time at KU? I know you talked about Tom Hedrick, and I believe he turns 90, I think, in May, so this coming month.
Yeah.
So who were some those classes, those influences?
Yeah. I mean, I can picture them all. And Tom did not like me at first. I walked into Tom's office. He knew I wanted to do sports radio, and at the time, like my sophomore year, I think it was, I had kind of long hair. I had a certain look about me. He said, first thing you got to do is you got to change your image.
That's a good Tom. I've heard some great Toms. That's a good one.
Yeah, give you a 4 or 5. Yeah. But thankfully he said that. I mean, I was pretty naive. So I did change my image, but thank you, Tom, for that. That was good. Max Usler, John Broholm, of course, Cal and Terry Bryant, Gary Hawk, John Kadich was a really big influence too. He was a great guy, and he was always quick with maybe a little bit of wisdom and sort of life's lessons. By the time I was a senior, really good dude, really good guy. But every person in that school, every professor that I came across, they were all very encouraging. I mean, I think they understood that if you've got a passion for something, they knew how to sort of fan those flames a little bit. And again, forever grateful for the education I received at KU.
Nope. Well said. Thanks for sharing, James. Okay, it's time for Fast Five.
All right.
Okay, so you graduated in 1999 from KU. Prince had a great song, 1999. So what was it like to party in 1999, James Sido style?
It was the Moon Bar. It was J.R. Giddens. That was after 1999, and I was not at the Moon Bar with J.R. Giddens. I did like interviewing him at the time, but yeah, for me in 1999, it's a miracle that I made it to 30, much less the age that I am right now. I'll just say that it was some interesting nights. The replay is still there, which is great, right? The replay lounge is still there.
I think so.
There you go.
So when I think of great broadcasting duos, I do think of Kevin Rummery, James Sido.
Yeah.
I know you've mentioned a few names. So who's at the top of your broadcasting list of icons?
Besides Romery?
Yeah, besides Rummery. Who's 2 and 3?
Yeah, so you mean from a national perspective or?
Yeah, national, or I don't know, there's some regional, just somebody that inspired you over time.
When I was in college, I was inspired by Craig Kilborn quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So much so that I called up the ESPN office and somehow got connected to his desk line and interviewed him for a project, talking to him about getting started in sports broadcasting. Oh. So back in the day, he would have been on my Mount Rushmore for sure. But then also when I was growing up, I really did think that Bob Costas was sort of the gold standard when it came to sports journalism.
Yeah, I think Bob, his interview skills are amazing. Like when he used to do that late, I don't know if you remember that late show.
It's funny too, because those two guys, they're not terribly similar, right?
No.
Kilborn and Costas, not that close, but for their own little niche, I think they were really terrific.
So one of the stories I remember you doing at 6 News, you visited Seneca, Kansas. I know that because that's where my parents live. The week of the KU football Iowa State game, and you were trying to get kind of the locals' reaction to Seneca Wallace. Any memories of that trip to Seneca, Kansas?
I
think
do
you were
have
at a barber shop. Remember you were at a barber shop?
That's correct. I was at a barber shop, and I told a man who I think was the barber who was on oxygen at the time that Seneca Wallace ran a 4.340, and he just kind of nodded his head. He said, that's that's what I'm talking about when I say, like, you go to those small stations, the small markets, you've got the opportunity to do stuff. I mean, granted, I had a news director at the time, Cody Howard, the great Cody Howard, a terrific news director, and frankly, one of the best news minds that I've ever come across. But he, he was the type who would encourage the ability to do stuff like that.
Right.
And so, like, walking up to a priest in Seneca who's walking his bike down the sidewalk, and asking him if he's familiar with Seneca Wallace because he was in Seneca, Kansas. It had zero news value, but it was fun. And it was a fun way to talk about the program and to ask, like, Bill Whittemore, have you ever been to Seneca, Kansas? He goes, I don't know what that is. And Mark Mangino was the head coach at the time, and he was still in that mode where he wasn't necessarily having a lot of fun with reporters, and so I asked him, and he's like, matter of fact, I have been there a number of times, and they're like, just have fun with it.
And I don't know if I told you, that priest you were referring to actually married my wife and me in 1995. So,
are you serious?
Yeah, Father Rod. Yeah, he married my parents, and I think he's still with us. So
I love that.
I didn't know if you knew
love that. That's terrific.
So I know you touched on this briefly too. You were a host on one-on-one trivia. I think you used to do that at sports bars, right?
We did. Yeah. We had sort of a rotating location for that. Yeah.
So what is your go-to trivia question, or if you don't have one, what sport makes the best trivia options?
A lot of people would say baseball because it is so stat driven, so data driven, and it's steeped in history. I think, and I'm biased, I would say college basketball, because I do think that college basketball for me was always the thing. When I was in 4th grade, every wall in my room was covered with college basketball photos. I think that was the sport that really kicked things into overdrive for me for wanting to be a sports broadcaster. So for trivia, at least what I would feel comfortable with would be college basketball.
And I think I've told you this. I do plan to be in Seattle. My first trip ever to Seattle in 2 weeks. It'll be my 33rd Major League park. My wife will be with me. She made a special shirt to commemorate because this is our last park. It's my 33rd overall, but my last Major League city. So any restaurant recommendations for the Riding House family?
What are you looking for cuisine?
We're open. We're open to anything. Let me know. What's Seattle?
Okay. Well, you've got terrific sushi out here, right?
I'll probably pass on that.
You're gonna pass on sushi? You don't like?
I will
sushi?
be passed on sushi.
Okay, we've got terrific Italian. Okay, we don't have. The barbecue scene is not anywhere close to what you have back home at all. We just don't have it yet. But
I'll go for Italian.
Really good seafood.
Okay. Seafood's good.
I've got a bunch of options for you. Okay, including where we had our rehearsal dinner, a place called Tavolata. There you go. Best happy hour in town, Tavolata.
I'll write that down.
Okay.
Well, James, hey, I appreciate your time. This was awesome to connect with you. And like I said, I've known you, I guess, since 1999. I always like to say cheers to your careers. And when I come off of Seattle, I might be bringing one of these with me, and I'm probably going to track you down and give you one of these.
And then there's that. Does that count?
I like it. That's the official
Cheers
font.
to careers.
All right. Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.